Welcome to Stranger Connections, where I celebrate wonderfully weird people and quirky stories. I'm your curious beast and host, Lisa David Olson, the practically world famous interactive speaker, embarrassing mom, podcaster, speaker trainer, all the things. So get a hold of me if you want me to jazz up your event. I even do improvisation sessions. So let's play. Today, I am interviewing a homicide detective that was with the Chicago Police Department over 22 years, if I'm right on that. And he was promoted to detective in the year 2000, serving on the Area 4 Homicide Unit and Cold Case Homicide Unit and Area North Homicide until his retirement in 2016. Welcome, Mike Hammond. Thanks for being on Stranger Connections, Mike.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Cold cases. I'm just going to say this. I don't like them. I
No.
am a crime listening fanatic. All my podcasts are true crime, even though that's
Yeah.
not what my show is. But
Yeah.
I love to listen to true crime. But you give me a cold case and you're like leaving the fridge door open. Don't do it. I need that ending. I need the
Yeah.
bow on top. How did you get into cold case work?
Uh, you know, I I made detective, like you said, in 2000, and as soon as I walked in the door in Area 4, I was lucky to get pulled in there into homicide right away. I kind of had relationships there because I worked on the West Side as a patrolman. And immediately there were cases I was interested in because I had this historical thing with like old mob murders and things, and I was just fascinated by looking at the old cases. So, and at that time, nobody cared as long as you were, keeping up with your caseload and you're working, um, and doing the things you needed to do. They're happy to have you looking at old cases because really nobody was doing it specifically, or there were a few guys, but it wasn't organized. And so about, I don't know, 5 years into my detective career, this department had created a federally funded cold case homicide unit, and I got asked to go work there, and I decided to try it out and did that for a couple of years. So, but I'm with you. You do the job to solve murder, so it's infuriating. It drives you out of your mind. Like I need answers to this. I need answers. On in my podcast, I just did one on a young lady who was murdered. We're coming up on 50 years ago, and that case is like passed down from
Mm.
detective to detective for all these years, and it's like I still want an answer to that thing so badly.
Wow. I'm sure because, well, for one, I want to say thank you so much for your service. That is incredible, especially
Yeah.
Chicago. Wow. We'll just leave it at that. Wow. Because that
Thank
is,
you.
especially, yeah, as of late, you hear so many things. The the one thing I want to say, like a case that you say is going on 50 years unsolved, how things have changed, the advances with science or how the items were, how the evidence was stored, or maybe people sorted through it because they didn't understand they couldn't
Yeah.
touch it back 50 years ago. You must have seen so many things along the path of everyone before
Oh
you
yeah.
who tried to solve it.
Yeah. Well, there's in that particular case, especially, there is evidence that would be fantastic to have, and uh, we just have never been able to find it. Our and I describe in that show our ERPs, which is our evidence and recovered property section. We have a couple of them, but the main warehouse is like out of the Indiana Jones thing, right? You walk in and it's like a city block long and wide, and I still believe that it is there, but we're just never able to find it. And in retrospect, like I wonder if I didn't spend too much time trying to find that evidence, because it was definitely going to be probative DNA type stuff, and there was good suspects in that case, and they may still yet find it. But in some ways, I kind of, if I had to do over again, I would have kind of let that go at some point and gone back and interviewed, pushed some of those people who are potential suspects a little bit, see if they would have told me anything. But yeah, it's crazy. It's just like another case that's now getting on 60 years old, a young woman who was killed in 1957.
Mm.
And there was a good suspect. that we went down to Texas and interviewed and actually got a DNA sample from, but we could find no evidence to compare it to, just nothing. So, and it's, again, it's not looking to place blame there. It's just after 60 years of, I think I counted up just for dramatic purposes on that. The case is 50 years old, and I think I counted there's been 33,000 murders since she was murdered.
Oh man.
So you can imagine the evidence that's up there. And
In
yeah,
what span of the land? 33,000 in the United States, or where are you saying?
city of Chicago.
Just in the city of Chicago?
Yeah, she was killed in 1974.
Oh,
And I can't remember, it was over 30,000, maybe it was 31,000. I got the exact number based on what I could calculate. So it was within call it 100, plus minus.
wow.
But yeah, so in that 50-year span, 30 some thousand murders just in the city of Chicago, you know.
And what you
So
need on those cold cases is the Dateline, the Keith Morrison phone call. And then the phone rang and changed everything.
how about it? And how about it? And my hope hope stays eternal, right? I'm like,
I know.
one of these days, somebody is going to, because amazingly enough, a lot, with the exception of one person, the players, all the potentials in that and everything, everybody is still alive. And so I'm sure they weren't too excited to hear that podcast, but life's hard when you
Yeah.
are a murder suspect, yeah, I'm hoping still that that call comes. Although I'm retired, but it's okay.
No, you're
You know,
never really retired.
oh no, that call comes. I'm still
Oh,
finding somebody to go handle it, and there are still plenty of men and women on the department love to sink their teeth into that if we got something. So yeah,
well, and
um,
I'm lucky enough to work alongside officers in Minnesota. I'm their records, their assistant, their local dispatch kind of person, and smaller than Chicago.
yeah,
But one thing that I've noted is the best cops can think like the criminal, which is scary. What a thin line. Just like an actor who gets into that role
yeah.
and has to become that person they're portraying. But for yourself, how does that handle for your mental health to be able to go, all right, they must have been doing, because you're solving it. You're a puzzle
Yeah,
solver that
yeah.
is beyond, doing a Rubik's cube, obviously. So how do you keep your mental health away from going too far into the dark?
Yeah, it's a challenge. I think while you're doing it, I know like I being a homicide detective was my dream, and I read a book when I was in high school, a book forced on me by English teacher, like you got to do a book report. And I'm like every other 16 or 17-year-old boy, like, oh, he said, no, I got one I think you'll like. And it was In Cold Blood, Truman Capote's book. And it just it changed the way I viewed the world. It really did. I was like, this is unacceptable to just read about it. And then I started watching the news differently, and I knew that I wanted to like do something, and that started me on this path. But the thing that I didn't realize, even as a patrolman, I worked on the West Side, saw a lot of stuff, and did a lot of work. But when I made detective, about 6 months into working murders, I hit a wall where I was like, I had no idea the bodies were just going to come like at this rate. It was just going to be like standing on the ocean waiting for the waves to stop. And I kind of hit a wall where I I don't know, I didn't, I got through it, but I found myself like I never been a science fiction fan. I'm watching like Harry Potter and stuff, you know what I mean, just to like escape totally, not be thinking about it at all. But um, I worked my way through that and kept working, and then you start to get into a space where you're doing it. But as far as mental health, you figure that out. You gotta reach out, talk to the people around you, let you know when you're hurting. And we had a really good crew there in Area 4, and we kind of kept tabs on each other and would talk. It's not like we were a therapist. And sometimes the advice was probably like the opposite advice you should give somebody, but still having somebody to talk to is, um, you know, it's great, it was, so yeah, you gotta stay on top of that. And it's hard. And to your direct point, you do walk a real thin line when you're out there talking to people on the street and you kind of start to get into that mindset and then you go home and you're having, at, you know, dinner parties or birthday parties for the kids and things like that. And you're, my ex-wife, who I'm still very close with, the mother of my kids, she'd have to come over and say, hey, maybe language, like, oh, yeah,
You
sorry,
forget.
sorry, right, or something, whatever, or, maybe that conversation not appropriate because even, you know, I like talking about, I always enjoy talking about it and a lot of civilians like to hear. And so people come out and ask me stories. Well, maybe a 6-year-old birthday party is not the place to be having those stories. You know what I mean? So yeah,
Those
you
gentle
do.
reminders are so helpful.
Oh, they really are. You know what I mean?
The elbow
Sometimes
in the
not even,
ribs.
yeah, right. Sometimes the less gentle, the better even, right?
That's
Like,
true.
hey, he's dumb, but,
All of your investigating and all of your experience with just, starting in patrol and working your way up, what is your most common finding for violent crime? I immediately think drugs or mental health
yeah,
or
correct. In a city like Chicago, or, I have a really good friend of mine who's finally retired Minneapolis homicide detective, and so we had a lot of cases back and forth because a lot of our gang members back and forth between Minneapolis and Chicago, and we talk about this kind of thing a lot. In cities like that, big, really big urban areas, most of the violence is around narcotics and the control of the narcotic sales and the money that it brings in. It's very lucrative, and so that control and competition for that money is what causes a lot of the violence, the majority of it. You still have, domestic murders and, other various things. But, if you took out the narcotics kind of gang related murders out of the total sum, it wouldn't be as nearly as big a number as we turn up with every year.
yes, that's what I was thinking. It's this is my territory, or yeah, you
Yeah.
owe me this money, all that kind of stuff. What about when you're interviewing people and you have to know these different personalities, these pathological liars,
Yeah.
narcissistic behaviors, the gaslighters.
Yeah.
Um, they think they're above you, they think they're smarter than you, that kind of a thing. Did you have a certain style or a way to get through to people?
Yeah, I mean, one of my partners once said that, my style of interviewing, especially with like potential offenders, is kind of overwhelming with common sense, just like, but, it's my contention that the most important skill in being an homicide detective is the ability to communicate with people and get people to want to communicate with you and to be able to not just listen to but hear what's being said and how it's being said. Because of all those factors that you just described, you have to kind of wade through that, and um, be able to hear and get people to want to talk to you. That's the whole thing, and it's a skill set. There's not a whole lot of Sherlock Holmes stuff that actually comes up. You know what I mean? It's really more about just that communication and that's why, there's this perception out there that I dislike, that I kind of rail against, that, and maybe some of this is deserved, based on history. I don't really know, but this kind of mindset that we, beat, torture, scream at people until, and TV and movie, film really plays into that. The reality is that doesn't work. You can, I mean, I've gotten mad and yelled at people and it doesn't
Hmm.
help. It just doesn't help. You're especially with hard street, you know, criminals, it's not going to work.
Right.
You gotta find a way to motivate them to want to talk to you, and that's not going to do it.
No,
It's
that's
not,
only on TV where they say, turn the camera off. And
Yeah, right, right, right.
you
Exactly
got
right.
cameras
Get
stuck
the
to your
phone
body
book.
everywhere.
Get,
Yeah,
yeah, get the phone book. Right? Like, yeah, okay. Like
not real.
hitting somebody with a phone book's going to make them admit to a murder. That's
Try to find a phone book nowadays.
how about it? How about it?
There's
Bring
no
that
phone
lab.
booth. There's nowhere for Superman to change his clothes anymore. There's no
Right.
phone. Yeah,
Bring
no.
that mouse in here.
And
Yeah.
so learning those different personalities is really interesting to me because you do find a pattern. I mean, all solving things is all about patterns. Figuring out a person,
Yeah.
it's all about patterns. So then you hear about cases where they use lie detector or polygraph. And I caught some of your other interviews and you were saying that's not your passion. You're not saying that that's the be all end all.
No, and my college professor, who's since passed away, that I was my like counselor and a good, really good man, was a polygraph expert, renowned, and he would be so frustrated with me to hear me talk about it this way. And I've got friends who are polygraph people. I don't mean to be disparaging all that, but for me, it's like it was just a means to an end. Like if somebody was asking, like, "Let me take a polygraph," okay, like I know you're lying. I know you're lying. I don't need a polygraph, right? Even if you didn't do it, you're lying about this. You're lying about your knowledge. You know what I mean? But oh, you want to take a polygraph? Okay, fine. And so I let them take a polygraph, and then they fail.
Well, let me
So
do it
okay,
again.
right. I was nervous. I was
Two
this
out
or
of
that.
three.
Yeah, right, right. Look, even if you passed, I wasn't going to buy it. Let me be honest with you.
Yeah.
So, and I know that I'm going to have the whole entire FBI after me now, but yeah, it's just, it's a means of, getting to a place for me. I know they can be very effective and all that. I'm not trying at all to disparage them, but for me, it was just like not something I counted very much on to. I'm not sure if this person's lying or not. And it's not like I thought everybody was lying. Sometimes, I would, but the people that were like, let me take a lie detector. I really want to, I want to prove to you, like, they're lying. They're lying.
So they thought
Like,
they could beat
yeah,
the
they can.
machine.
And that was some magical thing that was going to put me off. You know what I mean? And
Yeah, that's desperation. And also, it's not even admissible anywhere, is it?
it is not.
Yeah.
No,
So
it is
that's,
not.
yeah,
It is
can't.
not.
So
That
sounds like a
always
waste
looks
of
like
money.
it always looks like in court. And then detective, did you do anything? Yes, we took the uh, suspect for a polygraph examination. Object, okay, yeah, yeah, sustained. So then after the polygraph examination, what did you have a course of action then? Yes, we did, right? So I mean, that's what it looked like every time, almost,
Right.
it was never, he failed the polygraph. It's not admissible, and it was never really critical. You know what I mean? And both sides would always try and play games with that to get the jury to believe one side or another. And to me, it was like, yeah,
Mm,
okay, well, we're moving on. You know what I mean?
exactly. Yeah. Enough
Yeah.
about the
So
polygraph, you guys. Didn't you know it's not even admissible? Come on, let's
yeah,
go.
right. Well, but it can be effective. It's a good tool in a lot of ways. It was
I guess
just
just
not.
to see them, and I in those stories that you
Yeah.
read or hear, a lot of times it's that the person running it might say, "Oh, this shows that you're guilty," and they could be BSing, and that's
Yeah.
probably just TV, but
Yeah, and I have
that's
to
what it
say,
seems
in
like a game.
right, and I have to say, in fairness, there are polygraph examiners that are really, really good um, at exactly that, and no matter the outcome, one way or another, we're good at kind of giving me feedback, and this part I think is probably accurate. This part, I would be, I'm not so sure, but I think maybe look at that, or this clearly, the person's not giving you is not being factual. So
Mm,
yeah, I mean that there was that. It was just not something for me that I leaned on very much.
right. Well, and do you have a favorite case that stands out? In our standing around the barbecue, sharing stories kind of times, is there a favorite case that you are like, yeah, this one is the one that I'll always
Yeah,
remember?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as my show is, the victims are what stick with you, you know what I mean? And the story of the victims often stick with you. And sometimes are even though they're solved rather quickly, still the story of the victim sticks with you and that. But as far as the case, yeah, certainly there was a young 21-year-old woman that was shot and killed in her car 2 days after Thanksgiving 2001. And her name was Magdalena Idzikowska, Maggie, they called her. And um, we didn't actually have the scene, but the detectives that had the scene, it was a pretty busy time, and they, I don't know if they got, I just don't recall. Well, they got, I think, pushed into another case or whatever. But a week or two after the case, one of my partners, um, who is a Polish, comes from a Polish family and speaks Polish. Her family is Polish. Our homicide commander asked him to take a look at it, so he came to me with it, and it took us. There's good DNA evidence in that case, but it took us, I think, 4 years to identify her killer. Another 2 years to together the case strong enough to get him charged. And I think 3 years then by trial. It was 9 years by the time he was convicted. Um, and that case was never a cold case. I mean, we had leads that we were pursuing that entire time, but at the same time, we're catching other cases. So we couldn't, like, we had phone records that we had to track down because she had called a phone before she left her apartment that was what we call a burnout phone, meaning it was opened under false pretenses with a false ID. So wasn't directly tied to anyone. So we had to figure out who had that phone. And then also the DNA didn't hit to anybody in the CODIS DNA system. So we had to basically get DNA samples from everybody, every male that she knew or talked to, whether, she'd had a relationship with him or not. So it was just years of that as
Mm.
we were handling other cases, and we just stayed with it. And every time we got a chance, we went back to it. We had kind of a triage priority list. And, we got an answer finally and got the guy died in prison last year.
Oh my
So,
gosh. Wow.
yeah. So, and, got to know her family really well. And, yeah, that case, they all are important. Everyone you kind of get involved with, but that one will always stick with me just because, um, of all the work we went into it and all the
Right.
sleep
9 years.
I lost over it, and how many times
Oh.
I stared at those crime scene photos,
Hmm.
which were just, horrific for I don't know how many hours, just thinking I'm missing something. There's something here I'm
Right.
not seeing, you know what I mean? My partners as well. Yeah, that was a really good feeling to get him convicted. And so
What was
that
his reason that he killed her?
he it was a very unusual thing. He had been actually was an informant for a commander on the police department for like 18 years, which
Hmm.
added a real kind of interesting dynamic to it. Although the commander was very helpful for us, it wasn't like he was running interference for the guy at all. But um, and in the end, he never admitted to killing her, but he talked himself into a conviction anyway. I spent many hours on video talking with him, and he just denied he'd ever had sex with her. He denied he'd ever been with her that night. He came up with an alibi that we were able to tear down easily. But I think in the end, I think she was just a bit naive and was she went to meet with him because she was trying to get money together to move out of her parents' house with her boyfriend, and he was considerably older than her. He was like in
Oh.
his 50, she was 21. And he was a real player, slick guy, knew every big time dope dealer on the west side of Chicago. He was a very connected guy in that way. And I think he, kind of convinced her that, he would lend her some money somehow, and they agreed to meet that night. And Um, I mean, it was a sexual assault murder. And so he went there with a purpose, and she went there, I think, pretty naive, and that it went bad. You know,
Mm.
I think she was found naked, shot to death in the back seat of her car, and some pretty ugly defensive wounds. I think she, you know, I think it was sexually motivated, and my guess is, and this is way just my opinion based on spending all that time. I think after the kind of deed was over, she made it clear she wasn't going along. She wasn't going to let it go, and it turned violent. Is my best guess. But
Mm.
there's no question he's a killer because it's his DNA and his phone. So he was there, and he killed her. There's no question about that. Now, how it actually went down will forever remain a mystery. In fact, when I heard that I got notified from Illinois Department of Corrections that he had died. I was a little bit like, I wish I'd have known he was sick. I'd love to have talked to him one more time, because he was a guy that, because he'd been an informant for so long, he liked talking to the police.
Oh,
I mean,
right.
that conversation with him on video when we finally brought him in to charge him was about 9 hours.
Oh
Him
my
and I just
gosh.
talking, and me just continually trying to, okay, let him tell a story and then tear it apart. And I realized at some point he was just never going to admit to actually doing it, but I thought I was close, and because he was saying things to me like, that would make me a monster to do something like that. And then me saying back, not necessarily, things go bad and whatever, kind of being empathetic and as you have to do. And so, yeah, I mean, there was a lot that went into that case. It was,
Dang, that is a lot of that narcissistic, like give me that attention and make me feel better, even though it's not real. Oh man.
yeah. And he called me Mike, like we were old friends, that
Oh,
was his thing.
sure.
And then it got the appellate court reversed it on this thing that his first attorney didn't do. He didn't take the stand in the first trial.
Mm.
And unfortunately, we had to retry it. But fortunately, in the second trial, he got represented pro bono by he had a public defender first time. Second time, he had a big law firm. And this time, he took the stand. And of course, I'm a witness, so I can't be in there in the room, in the courtroom when he's testifying. But later, talking to the state's attorney and reading the transcripts, I mean, he told a fantastical tale, and the prosecutor, who was really good at his job, just ate him alive. But he the great part about it was his defense team did try and go down the road of me, like, pressuring him, using psychological kind of torture on him. But unfortunately, they had 8 hours of him saying, "Come on, Mike, hey, Mike, we're friends, aren't we?" And
Oh
I'd say,
my
"Yeah, of course we
gosh.
are." You know what I mean? So that was a little hard for the jury to buy that I had,
Right.
done anything untoward towards him. So, people think that we don't like being videotaped. That it's not accurate.
That's
It
right.
plays, but sometimes though, I will tell you, is your question earlier of the lines getting mixed. The first when they made that law and we had to video all homicide suspects. Um, the first few times I had these really ugly kind of like child murders. Um, those are tough because you don't have any witnesses. You need the person to tell you what happened. And
Mm.
the only way to do that, if you go in there berating them or calling them names and, making them feel, the obvious thing, like how could you hurt a child? How could you do? Then they're going to just shut themselves off. So you have to be empathetic, and you have to put yourself kind of in their shoes and make them think that you can understand it. And boy, the first time that I saw myself on video in front of a jury doing that, I was like, that's painful to hear myself being
Ooh,
that empathetic with a guy that just killed a child. You know what I mean? Like, well, I
right.
can understand, I can understand children can be tough. Like, luckily for
Mm.
me, the jury, I think, was smart enough to kind of understand what was going on, but it wasn't my favorite
No,
moment. I was like,
that's
you
not
know,
where you go, oh man, I wish I could do that every day. No.
yeah, Right, right, right.
That's not
Really
that's
enjoy
nice.
hearing myself having that conversation. Like, oh, God,
But it works.
it
It can
works.
work. So you got to
Yeah,
take that
yeah,
chance. Oh,
yeah. Right.
man. This is just so amazing, the work you do. And again, I thank you so much for your service. And I can't let you
Appreciate it.
go until I ask you to share a dare or a prank story, one you've done or had done to you. And I know cops don't prank each other or anything like that. There's no humor back there or any of that. So it's
Well, so
probably
I've
hard for
thought a
you.
lot about this, and
Sarcasm.
yeah, like I'm a pretty big guy, and but there's two quick stories I'll tell you. One's about me, and one's not directly about me at all. But the one is to the worst thing to happen to you when you're working around a bunch of people you really care about, and the ball busting, as we call it, is you got to be able to handle it. If you can't handle it, you just won't survive, because that's what we do. That's how you show love
That's
is
right.
really being on each other, and I grew up in Indiana, so I was always Hoosier or hillbilly or
I was
of
going to
course.
ask you, you must have had a nickname because you do get those.
Well, and my name's Mike Hammond, right? So even in college, it's like Mike Hammer. Yeah, no, it's not Mike Hammer. But Hammer was my nickname for years. And I'm like, that's not going to play all that great in civil court, but whatever. I, the worst thing that happened to you is to be on the news, like you're working on a case and the news cameras catch you walking around, right? Because then that you in the office, everybody's going to be on you. And I handled some guy who really didn't have a great plan, and his friend robbed the Shed Aquarium, which is one of our main tourist attractions, beautiful aquarium downtown. And it took us a really short time to solve it because they had ski mask on. They hit the uh, the money room and they got like $40,000, right?
Wow.
But the problem was one of the girls working in there when uh, they were telling, hey, get on the ground, everybody get down. One of the girls working there recognized the voice and even said to him, like, I'm just making up the name, but it's like, John, is that you? Right. So John was in custody within about, 10 hours and we got about 38 grand of it back or whatever it was. But there was a big as day. They show me walking down the big steps of the shared aquarium on the news, right? And I knew it was coming. Next day I go to work and one of my buddies and his partner see me walking in and one of them, Sammy, he's like, hey, Mike, don't let anybody give you a hard time, man. TV ads, uh, 10 pounds, they say, right? And his partner says, yeah, just tell them they had three cameras on you. I'm like, oh, yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks a lot. I'll keep that in mind. Uh,
That's love.
that is, yeah, yeah. And the other great one is this. I was associated with this, but this wasn't me. We had an incredible commander in our homicide unit. It's hard to describe. Likely the best policeman I ever knew, and I've known some incredibly brave and talented detectives and police officers, but this man's special. I mean, very, very good at what he did. And we get a call one day from the very unusual situation. The watch commander in the police district downstairs calls upstairs and says, hey, I got this pizza parlor on the line who said they got to call somebody ordered a pizza and they can hear them planning the robbery of my driver on the phone. They could overhear it, right? So so our boss has put him through. So he talks to him and he comes out and he goes, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go out and we're going to deliver this pizza. Right. So make this plan. And of course, being the man that he is, he's driving, delivering a pizza. Right. And, because he's not letting somebody else do that. Right. But in the end, it works out. They do try and come up and rob him and see what's going on. They take out, we get them all in custody, right? And we got them up there, and our best and Mo, detective goes in to interview the main guy who walked up to the car to try and rob uh, our boss, who's the pizza delivery guy. And so he's interviewing him. He comes out after a while, and we're all kind of sitting out there, including the boss. And he goes, "Yeah, he's given up. He's admitting it kind of to the whole thing, you know." And so the boss tells him, "All right, well, so are you done?" He goes, "Yeah, we're pretty much done." He goes, "So just type something out for me, you know, like a little synopsis of what he's saying, so we have it for, you know, because this bosses want to know, you know, there's attention to it." So he does. He comes out, he types it out, and we're all in the office sitting around doing other things now or working on that, whatever our part in that was. And he prints it out, he takes it in to the boss to read it. And we're all sitting out there, and about 10 minutes later, boss comes out and he goes, "This is BS. He didn't say this." He goes, "I am not going forward with this." And and we look like this is a very unusual conversation because first of all, he doesn't talk that way, and second, like this is the most respected of the of all of us homicide guys there, you know, at the time. And he's like, "Nah, that's what he said, boss. His exact words." He goes, "That's BS. He did not say this, man. Go back in there." We're like, "What is going on?" He goes, "No, what do you want me to do? Lie? I mean, that's what he said." And so it, the boss finally he's like, "You're so full of it, man." And he kind of laughs and turns and walks back in his office. We're like, "What's going on?" So he prints it out for us. And basically it says that the guy's in his statement says, "You know, yeah, we're going to be playing this robbery. We're going to walk up and, you know, I was going to stick the gun in the guy's face and rob him, whatever." He goes, "You know, when I got up there, I felt bad. I hesitated because the guy looked old and, you know, kind of slow, like maybe he had a mental health issue." And so I hesitated, and I think that's why we got caught. You know? So yeah, yeah, that wasn't the
Oh
statement
no.
that I'm looking for, but that yeah,
Oh
uh,
no.
we yeah, it's as funny to me now as that day. I mean, we were roaring, and even the boss we thought it was funny, but it was pretty awesome, pretty awesome.
And even for you to hear that conversation, he did not say that. And that's so
Yeah,
unusual for you to hear that even. And then to
right,
hear
because
what
the
he
guy's
was disputing.
admitted to it. You know, that's perfect. It's great. You know, why would he be, especially it's like, why would he be
Oh
disputing
God.
so upset? And we read it, we were just like, oh Lord, we're never going to be able to top this one. This is a good one.
And in the report, did it say what kind of pizza it was? I'm feeling pepperoni.
You know, good question. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to
See
that.
my curious
I
mind.
actually, I can't even tell you for sure there was a pizza in the
That's
box.
what I
There
was
was
wondering
definitely a
too. Did they
pizza.
really?
Pizza
Yeah.
box was definitely there, but my feeling is if there was a pizza, we probably would have eaten it. So I don't think
Yeah.
that there was.
You can't admit eating evidence, so that would
Yeah,
not be
right.
good.
Yeah, correct.
Well, I want people to find your show. It is Detective Story with Mike Hammond, right? Is that
Correct. Yep.
the title of it? Detective Story. And so I know you're going to have some new episodes coming out. There's a few that started. And yeah, I think it's been really fun talking with you. And you're looking to
Great.
be on other podcasts as well. Anything else you have going on? Are you
No,
um
you know, yeah, that's it. I'm just trying to expand out. I'm enjoying. I like telling the stories of the victims and giving some, uh, you know, uh, kind of celebrating the victims and giving the victims' families some, you know, further justice in that, and you know, some open cases still like to try and get solved and talk to some interesting people like yourself and just have some fun with it. My daughter is a big true crime fan like
oh
you, and that's
yeah.
how I started this really because she was insistent, like, Dad, listen, I listen to these things and they're awesome, but they're just missing your perspective, you know.
Oh,
And it
cool.
was a tough because it's counterintuitive for us to put ourselves out there like that. And I had to get the way all those guys that would tease me and women that would tease me all those years. I like this is giving them more fodder, but I got the approval from them. Like, yeah, it's a cool idea. So that's where we are now.
Fantastic. And maybe you'll have some of them on your show or something like that. You
Maybe,
never know.
yeah, yeah,
That
yeah,
would be
certainly,
fun because the
certainly.
storytelling with officers is always, always something I will just cherish and honor because you've been there, done that. And especially here in the Midwest, the stories kind of get more colorful as we tell them. So
Right.
I
Yeah. How
love a
about
good
it?
story.
How about it?
Well, I'm honored to have had you on my show, Mike Hammond. And remember that we can only be strangers once. And I invite you to stay weird.
Thank you very much. It's been my honor. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll see you again.